What's going on YouTube? Doing a quick charger video for you. Today what I'm doing is I'm replacing the struts. The driver's side was all wet, seemed to be leaking, so it had a little bit of roughness, I guess, when you turn a corner. Surprisingly enough, when you turn left, and it was actually the left shock that was leaking, so we're going to jump in and basically you're going to see where I'm at right now. Caps, the shock towers need to come off, and then we're going to be down here. As you can see, I've already taken the wheel off, and then our focus right now is going to be this guy right back here with a spring. So this is a strut. It's got basically a coilover shock. Start off by taking out just the attaching hardware. There's only a few pieces. Now, the first one that I did only took me about an hour and 15 minutes. Now that I have all my proper tools out, this one should take me less time. However, I am filming, so. Now then, this is pretty much the majority of the tools that I'm going to use. Well, for this job, a couple of them are redundant just because one might work better than the other. Oh, also some penetrating oil, WD-40, something like that, and little foamy earplugs. Oh, also, besides the jack, I have this jacked up with a jack, some jack stands. I'm going to use, if you only have one jack, obviously you'll have to use jack stands, but I'm going to use another jack on this also to kind of hold up the suspension here and basically all the components when I do finally remove everything. Alright, I'm going to start off by taking off this 18mm nut up here on the upper control arm, because this thing sticks and I want to get some penetrating oil in here. Found that out on the other one. Now you can use a fork to take this apart. I ended up just hitting with a hammer. But like I said, you want to get some penetrating oil up in there to get this thing to really kind of start letting go. Because I hammered and hammered on this thing, as soon as I put some penetrating oil on it, one smack and it came apart. Right here, this little guy, which is behind the brake line sort of, is where your front sway arm connects. I had a hard time getting this thing loose because the whole thing wants to spin when you try to break it loose. I don't know if you can see that. So what I ended up having to do is put a 10mm socket. So here's basically what I ended up having to do. This is a 13/16, which goes on the nut, and then I have a 10mm socket, of course, because everything's a different size. 10mm socket on the end of the stud there, the shaft. So I'm going to be basically turning the shaft in a tightening motion and loosening the nut with the big wrench. Sorry, you're in my way. I'm gonna have to back you up. Once again, it's always good to pre-lube your hardware. A little WD-40 or whatever your penetrating lube of choice is. Alright, then once you get it close to the end, you just spin the nut off. There it goes. Now this arm probably won't come out until I lower the assembly down, but I'll just leave it there for now. It's loose. Next is to get the bolt, which basically connects the bottom of the strut to the assembly, which is, yeah, of course all my stuff's in the way. That guy right there. This one's an 18mm as well, so I can use a big bar to break it loose. Probably be easier with like an impact or something, but this is what I got. This one actually doesn't loosen up too bad. There we go. Okay, it's a little bit of tension on that, not much. Now it's time to get my jack put up underneath and lift it up so I can take those bolts and hardware out. I want to place the jack underneath the lower ball joint so it don't cause any damage. So then the control arm, or sorry, the sway bar arm swings out real easy, and then I should be able to. I'll have to wait to take that lower bolt out. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work on the upper control arm, getting that nut off right up there. Alright, here's where I'm going to use my hearing protection. Alright, there it goes. Finally popped down. Alright, once you get the nut off there, go ahead and lower the assembly down. As you can see, that comes apart. And then should be able to get your bolt out of the bottom. There we go. Now, everything's just kind of sitting here. The strut is loose, other than the 3 bolts up at the top. There are the 3 nuts. So let me get those. Alright, last, taking out these top 3 nuts. This is a 13mm. Or a 1/2 inch. Whichever you prefer. Now this takes a little finagling to get out of here. It's not so bad. Trust me, it will come out. Alright, anytime you're installing new parts, you always want to compare your new parts to your old parts to make sure everything matches up. Now, these strut assemblies that I got from Rock Auto, they are Monroe struts. That's part number right there. Both of them are the same, they're interchangeable. Overall, they look exactly the same. Obviously, one's cleaner. The thing that I did notice right away is the old one had the nut mounted to it for the lower mounting bolt. The new one does not, which kind of had me freaked out. I pulled the I pulled the bolt to see if I could basically line up some hardware, but when I looked in the box, guess what? There's a bag of hardware. There's a brand new nut to go on the other side of that bolt, and there's 3 new locking nuts to go for the top of the strut mount. Now it seems to me that this thing goes back in easier than it came out, because I did just fed it up in there. I was actually going to slide it back out to demonstrate it, but like I said, it's already in there. It's easy putting it up in here than it is getting out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put the bottom bolt through before I put the top 3 in, and you want to make sure that your bracket for your sway bar is on the back of the shock, because if you put it in backwards, top holes aren't going to line up. That's not going to go in. You're going to have an awful time. So like I said, I'm going to put this bottom bolt through the bottom first. Alright, amazingly enough, this thing actually went all the way through. You can see the other end of the bolt sticking out right there. Went all the way through on the first try. The other side I had to fight and fight and fight to get that stupid thing to go all the way through, which it came down to actually unbolting the top, bringing this and twisting and twisting and twisting, and then hammer on it until that thing went through. So I don't know why, for some reason this thing went in easier than the other side did. Now I'm going to line up the top bolts, stick the studs up through the holes, and then put the nuts on basically loose, get everything attached loose before I tighten everything together. Alright, once you get your bottom bolt put in, put a nut on it, get your 3 top mounting studs slightly lined up. What you're going to need to do is you're going to actually need to jack the assembly up in order to get those bolts to go through, or the studs to go through shock tower. There she goes. Alright. Studs are up through. Get your nuts started. Alright, now come back down here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on reattaching my upper control arm. There we go. Almost done. Once you connect your sway bar, go ahead and put the nut back on. And like I said, just as when you took it off, had to use a 10mm to hold it in place. Guess what? Same thing, tighten it back up. Got your 13/16. Got your 10mm on there. Now basically you're going to go in a loosening motion with the ratchet in order to tighten everything back together. That is horribly out of focus. So now that everything's back together, it's time to torque everything down according to the Dodge Charger forum. The lower bolt, actually, the nut down there, which you really can't get much of a socket on, 128 foot-pounds. The stabilizer link upper nut, focus. So that guy right there, the rusty one, that is 74 foot-pounds. Sorry about that, my card got full, so the video cut off. Anyway, your top ball joint nut, torque that to 35 foot-pounds, and then come up here and tighten your top shock mounting nuts down to 20 foot-pounds each. Once you're done with that, don't forget to put your cap back on. You're all done. Anyway, there it is, complete. Don't forget to comment and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next video. Thanks for watching.